Sometimes it's kind of fun to create sort of a pan and zoom effect where you move across an image and then zoom to feature one particular part of that image. So here's an example where we're panning across a group of people, and then at the end we can zoom on this one particular guy to get a little bit more information. This can be a nice technique if you're presenting maybe an e-learning scenario where you're showing how a particular person might respond to a challenge or a question. Here's another example. In this one, I've got a row of frogs and other little creatures. And if we pan across the group of them, then when we get to the end where the snake appears, we can zoom and hear a little bit more about him. So let's see how we build something like this. What you can do is create your own panoramic image by piecing together several individual images. So in this example, I just used several images of people, and most of these images I got free from elearningart.com as a free download. And then I just selected them all and grouped them as one image. And this back part here, this background, is just a blue rectangle that I created with PowerPoint shapes, and then I drew this brown rectangle over top of that. What we're going to do here is build two slides, one for the pan and one for the zoom. And we need to kind of start with the end in mind. So I'm going to select my panoramic image and position it at the place where I want the panning motion to stop. So in other words, I'm going to feature this guy right here, so I want him to be right in the middle of my slide. And then I'm going to add a duplicate of this slide. So we'll come over here and right-click on the thumbnail and choose Duplicate Slide. And the first slide here is where we're going to apply the motion. This is a little bit tricky. Even though my ultimate plan is to have the image move to the right, what we're going to do is apply a motion path to the left and then reverse the path direction. And what that does is it makes sure that the stopping point of this image is exactly lined up with the duplicate image on my next slide, because we want it to look real fluid, right? Like it's actually one slide. We don't even want a 1 pixel jump. So with my panoramic image selected, I'm going to come over to my custom animation window, choose Add Effect, Motion Paths, and then choose Left. And now we need to do a little bit of fine tuning. First thing is I'm going to right click on the path and choose Reverse Path Direction. And I'm also going to change the start of this animation to with previous so that it's going to begin as soon as the slide appears. Another thing that we want to do is make this motion path quite a bit longer. It's pretty short right here. In fact, we're going to extend this green arrow. I'm going to hold on my Shift key and just stretch this green arrow all the way off the left edge of my slide. And this way it's going to cause that image to start way over here at the left so that we see the entire line of people as they move across the slide to the right. And this is something that you'll need to play with a little bit as far as the length of your motion path, depending on the size of the image that you're using. The other thing that you'll want to adjust is the timing. So let's come back over here, select the motion path, and then choose timing. And I'm going to set this one at about 6 seconds. That feels about right to me because I might want to, fit in a little bit of narration or something while we're panning across these people. So let's look at this preview. This looks pretty good, and it looks like we're stopping in about the right place, so that looks good. Now let's think about how we can zoom in on this last character here, this guy. What I've already done here is on slide 3 I created a larger version of that same image. I just copied the same graphic and then I sized it up quite a bit to take up most of the slide. And then I used PowerPoint's cropping tool, which you can get to from the Format tab and then choose Crop, just to get rid of the part of the image that I didn't need. And I grouped that image with the same blue rectangle that I used for the background of the previous slides. Now that I've made my zoom, I'm just going to go ahead and right-click and cut from this slide, move to slide 2, and then I'm going to paste it right over the images on slide 2. And now we just need to add that zoom animation. So with that image selected, I'm going to choose Add Effect, Entrance, and then choose Faded Zoom. And once again, I'm going to choose the start to be with previous so that it happens as soon as the slide appears. And then from here, if you wanted to, you could add, a thought bubble over here or a call out like I did in the example that we saw earlier. And now we can also get rid of this third slide here. We can just delete that because that was really just a working area. It wasn't part of my presentation. Okay, so just to show you another look at how this appears when you publish from Presenter, here's how that panning motion is going to look, and then at the end of the pan, then we can zoom in to feature this one particular character that appears at the end. So I hope that maybe gives you some new ideas for ways you can liven up your scenarios with motion paths and zooming. So I was talking with someone in the Articulate community forums about how to simulate a pop-up box in an Articulate Presenter project or in a PowerPoint presentation. Here's an example of that. I've got a slide here, and you can see that the slide is asking me to click on the penguin's wing to find out the answer to this question. And if I click on the wing, then the slide grays out a little bit and this pop-up box appears and gives me some more information. This is actually done with a couple of separate slides. You just have to think of your slides as layers in one interaction rather than separate slides in a presentation. So let's switch over to PowerPoint and I'll show you how this is done. Okay, so here's that first slide, and you can design yours to look however you want, but in this example you can see I've got an image and I've got this text box right over here. And now that I've got this slide set up for my intro, I need to set up my pop-up slide. So basically, the pop-up slide is an exact duplicate of the original with a few additions. So let's come over here to the thumbnail, and we're going to right-click the thumbnail and choose Duplicate Slide. That makes an exact copy. And from here, I'm going to use the Insert tab and use the Shapes drop-down to select the rectangle shape. And I'm going to draw a rectangle over top of my entire slide. This is going to make that grayed out effect. Right now it's blue. I don't want it to be blue, so I'm going to right click and choose Format Shape. And here I'm going to use the Colors drop down to select black, and then I'm going to use this transparency slider to make it about 45–46% and then click Close. So that looks about right. Okay, next I need to draw the pop-up box. I'm going to use the Insert tab again and use the Shapes drop down. This time I'm going to use the rounded rectangle. I'll use that shape and just draw right over top of the penguin, and then you can enter whatever text you like in there. I'm going to go ahead and insert mine, and that looks a little bit small, so I'm going to use the Home tab here, and I'm going to up the size to, let's say 36. Whoops, did that work? I don't think it did, so we'll try it again. There we go. Now it's 36. And you can also do some editing to the look of that box too. For example, I'll just click the Format tab. I'll apply one of these shape styles, and I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. I like this brighter blue a little bit better. Now from here, another thing that you might want to do is apply an entrance animation so that the pop-up appears to kind of fade in or pop up off of the slide. So I'm going to click my Animations tab, choose Custom Animation, and over here I can do all of my animations effects. I'm going to choose Add Effect, and for my entrance effect I'm going to choose, in my case I like Faded Zoom. I think that looks pretty nice. Then I also want to change the start to with previous instead of on click. This will make the animation happen as soon as the user arrives at this slide. Okay, so that's it for the pop-up slide. Now I need to go back to my initial slide, and I'm going to apply a hyperlink over top of the penguin's wing because that's the area that the user needs to click. So I'll use the Insert tab and the Shapes drop down, and I'm going to select the rectangle and draw a rectangle right over the penguin's wing. Now I don't want it to be blue, I want it to be transparent, so I'm going to right click, choose Format Shape, and here I'm going to up the transparency all the way to 100% so that it's invisible. Then I also need to get rid of that line, so I'll use the Format tab, choose Shape Outline, and then select No Outline. So there's my shape, and now I need to apply that hyperlink. So I'm going to right click, choose Hyperlink, and from here I'm going to send the user to a place in this document, and it's going to be, in this case, slide 2, because that's where my pop-up appears. And then I'll just click OK. So that's pretty much it. Now you can view the slide in PowerPoint, or you can publish from your Articulate Presenter menu right up here. Choose the Articulate tab and then select Publish. And once you do that, it'll look a lot like this. So again, if I click the penguin's wing, then that pop-up appears just like I designed it. So that's it. That's how you can simulate a pop-up box in your PowerPoint presentation or your Articulate Presenter project.
Hey, this is Mike, and I just want to take a minute to share a couple of simple tips for anyone who ever builds diagrams and charts in PowerPoint. So things like a mind map, could be PERT charts, could be process diagrams, org chart is another probably pretty common one. Basically anything where you want to show relationships between certain things or certain objects. So here's an example of what I see a lot of people do when they build these. they draw lines, they just draw regular lines, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everything looks fine. The challenge comes when we start making adjustments and moving things around here on the chart. So let's say that I don't like where this decision point is here, and I want to move that over. You see, I move that, and now it's disconnected, and I've got to go back. I've got to grab this arrow. I've got to take it over. I've got to take this elbow point. I've got to move it over. It's not wanting to go in the right place, and so it's just a really messy way to do anything where you're using these kind of lines to connect objects. So a better way, instead of just using regular lines, is to use connectors. And if you notice back here on our original, the endpoints for these lines are white squares, and that's what it's going to look like if it's just a regular line. Over here on our new and improved version, when we select that, we see green circles instead, and that tells us that these are actually connectors. And what that means is when I use connectors, I can move these shapes around, and all of my lines are going to automatically adjust, and I don't have to do that extra tedious work of fixing 3 lines every time I just want to move a single shape. So if you're wondering what the difference is between just a regular line and a connector, really when you start off there isn't any difference. So regardless of which of those you want to use, you're going to start the same way by just coming up here to our shapes and grabbing whatever type of line that you want to use, so with arrows, without arrows. The difference comes in how you draw the lines and where you start and end those lines. So if I just come down here and I draw a line and then I move it up, that's sort of the plain regular old line that we saw before, and we don't want to use that. So if I want to make this a connector instead of a line, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to start the same way. But if you notice, when I hover over this shape, I get these sort of black connection points, one on each side of this shape. So what you want to do is you want to start your line right on one of those connection points, and then when you drag it to the next shape, see I've got 4 connection points on each of the corners of this shape, and you just want to make sure you drop it on one of those anchor points or connection points, and we've got our green endpoints here to tell us that, okay, hey, that's a connector. Now I can dynamically arrange that, and everything's going to stay connected no matter what. So really small, simple difference that can make building these kind of charts a lot easier. A couple other things that can save you some time is if you don't want a straight line connector, you can choose one of these elbow connectors. As long as you're using those anchor points for your start and end points, they're going to be anchors and everything's going to adjust the way you want it to. If you change your mind and you want to change one of those connectors you've already added, just right click on top of that and go down here, and you can change that to any of these 3 connector types. And we've seen the straight connector and the elbow. We want to see what the curved connectors look like. So you can see that it's easy to change connector types. The other thing that is handy is normally every time I want to go and do another one, I've got to go back. Even if I'm using the same connector, I've got to keep going back up here and picking that same one over and over again. But if you right click on the one you want and lock the drawing mode, now it's going to keep that tool on, and I can keep using that as many times as I want, and I'll never have to go back up there and keep repetitively picking the same tool over and over again. And the last thing I want to show you how to do is there might be times when it's helpful to add an additional anchor point. So let's say that I'm going to move this around maybe to a new position, and I don't want to anchor it in one of those 4 default positions. So right now it's just the midpoint of each of the sides of that shape. So what I'd like to do is add a custom anchor point. And that's pretty easy to do. All you have to do is right click on the shape, go down here to edit points, and now I can put a new point. Let's say we'll put it right about there. I'm just going to add that point, and that's going to give me a new anchor point to anchor to. So if I go back and grab my line and I come up, and now you can kind of see that I've got an additional anchor point right at that spot where I wanted it. So you're not limited to those default anchor points, and you can put those anywhere you want to get pretty specific for what you need on your charts. So those are a few things that maybe not everybody knows that I hope can help you when you're working with charts to build them a little bit better and a little bit faster. Hope that helps.
Hey Pam, so here's a simple idea for you. You had asked for thoughts on how to make it look like a clip art character is shivering. And on this slide, I've got a very nervous looking character. She's separate from her background. You'll notice if I move her around, the background stays put. So if your character has a background, or if it's grouped with other things, that might have come along with it, you'll want to separate the character from the background so that, you can animate the character all by itself. What we're going to do is apply a motion path animation and then shrink it down real small so that the movement is kind of subtle. And to do that, we've got our character selected, and we're going to come up here to the Animations tab in PowerPoint. We're going to click this little arrow right here to get the drop down, and right down here at the bottom we've got this option called Custom Path, and that's the one we want to choose. When you do that, you'll see that your cursor changes to this little crosshair icon, and then you can draw the path that you want the animation to take. So I'm going to click right in the middle of my clip art character here, and I'm going to hold my mouse button down and just do kind of this scribble motion here, kind of just go up and down several times. It doesn't have to be precise at all, because this is going to be kind of a subtle movement when we're all done. I'm going to release right there about in the middle. And you can see initially the movement is going to look very dramatic, as you just saw, but what we can do is zoom way in to get a real close look at that path, and we can resize it. So I'm going to hold on my control key here and scroll my mouse wheel forward so that we can get a nice tight view of that motion path. And from here we can select the motion path. It's already selected now, and I'm going to just grab the corner here and resize it down to be about as small as PowerPoint lets us make it. You can see how tiny it gets. So I'm just kind of resizing this the same way that I would resize a shape or an object. The only difference here is that we're resizing the motion path instead, and then we'll scroll back out. So I'm going to hold down my control key and scroll my mouse wheel toward me to come back out to a wider view. Now once you've got your animation in place like this, you can sync your animation with your audio if you want, because over here you can see how it defaults to being an on-click animation. So that means you can use Presenter's Sync Animations tool if you want. Or if you'd rather have the animation start right when the slide starts, you can come up here to this Start item right here and change this to With Previous, and that way the animation is going to begin as soon as the learner arrives at the slide. Another thing that you might want to consider is stretching the length of the animation out a little bit. You can see it defaults to a couple of seconds here, but if you want it to last a little longer, you can stretch this out a little bit. And you can play with what kind of time frame looks good for your situation. I made mine, I think, about almost 5 seconds here. So now if we come up to the Articulate tab, we can preview this. We'll preview this slide and see what this would look like once it's published. So there's our character, and you can see how she's kind of quaking or shivering. So I hope that that gives you maybe some ideas that you can run with. I'll go ahead and attach this file to the forum conversation, and looking forward to hearing what you do with this.
Hey, this is Mike, and I just want to show you how easy it is to create your own graphics and images for your e-learning courses. And I really like this pictogram style, which is really just basic, simple representation of real objects. And unless you've been living under a rock somewhere, you've probably seen these types of images in infographics, tons of those that use these type of pictogram images. They're popular for use in explainer videos. Obviously, you've probably seen them on highway signs and airport signs and everything else like that. So they're really, really useful and super, super simple, Matter of fact, so simple that I would say anybody can create these. To show you how easy this is, I will recreate this. I'm just going to go and grab my circle tool here, put a circle there for the head. I'll go grab my rounded rectangle, size it about like that. Now with my arms and legs, I'm going to grab that same rounded rectangle, and I'm just going to take this little adjustment icon here and drag that as far as I can to the right, and that gives me that fully rounded shape on both edges. So now I'm just going to use my rotation handle here, rotate my arm for this side, and I'm going to make a copy. I'll rotate it around for the other side and get that positioned, and then I'm just going to make one more copy for the first leg, another copy for the second leg, and I'm going to just move those into position. One nice tip for that is you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. Sometimes that's easier to get a little more precise placement, at least for me, than what it is to be able to get using the mouse. So once you get that just the way you like it there, that's a pretty quick and dirty version of that. Now I can fill those in, turn off the outlines if I want, and I've got a character there in less than 30 seconds. And then once you get started, if you need certain types of clothing or other kind of accessories like safety equipment or whatever the case may be, it's really simple to add those by just adding some other additional basic shapes. So I've kind of simulated a hard hat here with a orange half circle. I've created a tie here. That's just a combination of triangles that are sized and rotated, and then when they put them all together, it sort of looks like a tie, right? So between the addition of other shapes and then adding in colors, you can kind of add some more richness and some more details very, very simply. Then once you get a little bit of practice, you can kind of add some additional shapes and you can pose these characters. So again, these are all just basic shapes inserted, rotated, and sized to get the effect that you're after. You can even get some pretty good detailed type images here. So for this example, this came from a crane operator lift signals course, and we couldn't find any of the right images from any stock photo site, so we decided to build our own, and this is what we came up with, and I think they turned out pretty well here. So we've got just basic shapes, different types of hard hats. Here you can see, I think that's a pretty good looking representation of a hand. We've got a couple of different versions of hands here. And once you add in some arrows to indicate motion, you've got some pretty nice, really useful images that you can use. Now, once you start to look at things as being comprised of just basic shapes, you can start to make just about anything you can imagine. So here's an example of an overhead crane that we built. And again, if we break these down, it's just some squares and rectangles and circles and lines combined to make that nice looking shape. One thing that I have found helpful is once you get this all set up and arranged the way you like it, it's helpful to either group it, which we can do here by doing a right click and group. So now once I move that, I don't have to worry about getting all of the little small individual parts and pieces. Another advantage of that is I can now still go back in. So for instance, if I wanted to color one of those individual components, I can go back in there and I can color that in. I don't lose the ability to do that. The other alternative, instead of grouping, is you can use PowerPoint's merge shape tools. I've put mine here on the quick access toolbar because I use them so much. One of the nice things here I can do if I use this shape union tool is now I've actually merged that all into a single shape. Now I can't go back in individually edit or modify the individual parts. But what I can do is now I can treat this as if it's one whole complete shape. So if I give this, for instance, a gradient fill, notice it fills everything as one individual shape instead of a collection of multiple ones. So advantages to both of those approaches. The other thing you can do using those merge shape tools is you can not only merge them, but you can also subtract and combine them in different ways. So in this example, I will use the shape combine tool, and I've sort of done some subtracting out of where that shape was overlaid, and you can really do some really nice creative shape creation using those merge tools. Another great and helpful tip is once you get those things set up the way you like them, if you're going to reuse those especially, it's helpful to save them as a picture. So what I can do for that is I'm going to right click, I'll save it as a picture. Let's call this Safety Man. And now I can create a whole library of those that I can use in other courses or in other places anytime I want. And when I want to go grab one of those, I can just pull that in just like any other regular picture. And there you go, you're off to the races. The last thing, which is really helpful to get you, if you ever need some really unique shapes, so sometimes a circle and a square just doesn't quite cut it. So when you encounter those kinds of situations, what you can do is use the ability of PowerPoint to edit individual points on shapes. So I'm just going to right click on the shape and I can go to edit points. So now I can kind of move these around and get some really unique shapes. Or in the case of this little drinking fountain here, what I wanted to do was get that rounded edge on one side. So you can also add additional points or take points off, whatever the case may be. And then you can kind of move those and get a shape. And then I can also change what kind of a point that is. So I'm going to change that to a smooth point. And now I can kind of arrange, drag that around. You know, I've got some ability to adjust the curves. So really nice thing to be able to do that. And with those tools, you can get that in just about any shape that you can imagine. And really simple thing to do right inside PowerPoint. So there you go. There's a few tips to hopefully help you create some images that you can use in your courses. They don't have to be complicated. As long as they can clearly communicate your message, they're good enough. And I hope that helps.
Hey everyone, Nicole here. Have you ever wanted to create this type of look with your images? That is, circular images with a transparent background? You might think that you need to know how to use complicated graphic editing software to do this, but I'm actually going to show you a quick way to accomplish it simply using PowerPoint. And the best part is that you can easily save the images to use in your storyline projects as well. So let's have a look at how it's done. We'll start off on a new slide here in PowerPoint, and we'll begin by inserting our images. You'll notice that our images are all different shapes and sizes. In order to save time, I'll edit all my photos at once. So I'll just move them around to space them out and lay them out where I can see all of them. The next thing I want to do is use the crop tool to crop my images and make them as close to a square as possible. You'll notice that there are some image dimensions in the top right-hand corner of the application. Unfortunately, they aren't listed in pixels, so it's hard to get it just right. But try to get the width and height as close to the same number as possible to make it as true of a square as you can. Do this for all of your images. As you can see, I don't get the numbers perfect, but just close enough. Now that we've turned all of our images into squares, the next step is to make them into a circle. And to save time, we can edit all of our photos at once by holding the Control key as we select all 4 shapes. Next, go to the Format tab and apply the Soft Edge Oval picture style to your images. I also remove the blurred edge by clicking on Picture Effect and choosing No Soft Edges. Finally, an easy way to resize all of your images at once while they're all selected is to type in your desired width in inches in the size text box. I also used the Align feature to quickly line up my images in a neat and evenly spaced row. That's how quick and easy it is to create circular cropped images with a transparent background in PowerPoint. Now, to use these in your Storyline project, simply right-click on the image, click Save As Picture, and make sure to pick PNG from the Save As type. If you don't, you'll get a white background, not a transparent one. Name and save your images to the desired location. Now we're in Storyline, and let's say that you're using this drag and drop template that I recently shared with the community, and you want to update the images on the bottom to your new images. Simply select a picture you want to update, choose Change Picture, and select your newly cropped image. Voila! I hope that you now see how easily you can create your own cropped circular PNG images simply by using PowerPoint. Thanks for watching!
Here's a quick way to generate some tints and shades of a selected base color in PowerPoint. Now, the way this works is you actually set up your initial color, your base color, just like you would any other rectangle. So that's what this rectangle is right here. It's actually just filling up the entire slide. Just put that back. And then what we have after you fill this with whatever color, we just have a bunch of smaller cubes or rectangles, squares placed over them with different levels of transparency. So if I just right click any one of these, I can show you that what we do is just progressively fill this with white. Well, that's what we do for the tints, right? The tints are all filled with white. So as I come down here, this is 70% transparency, which means we're letting in about 30% white, all the way down here where we're letting in 90% white, and it gets a lot lighter. But it's all a variation off of this initial base color. Now, for the shades, pretty much the same thing, except for adding white, we're just adding black. Move that over. Same base color, right? So this rectangle is filling up our entire slide, and then each of these just lets in a little bit more black, and then obviously just darkening our original base color. So just a super quick way to work with tints and shades from a single base color. Really welcome your feedback. If you have any comments for ways that maybe we could improve this, but a really quick way hopefully to generate a very simple color palette based on a single base color in PowerPoint.
For a highlighter effect, here's what you can do. I'm going to come up to the Insert tab, choose the Shapes menu, and we want to select this tool right here called Freeform. Once you click on that, then you can just click on your slide several times like I'm doing here to draw a shape that you want to use for your highlighter. And you can see I'm making mine, kind of jaggedy, and that's just because it's going to look a little bit more natural and organic that way, more like a real highlighter would, instead of making everything completely perfect and symmetrical. Once you draw the shape, then you can go ahead and format it. So up on the Format tab, we want to choose the Shape Fill, and I like yellow for a highlighter, but you can choose whatever color you like. And then for Shape Outline, we're going to choose No Outline. Okay, the next step is we want to give this a wipe animation so that it looks like it's being drawn onto the slide from left to right. Up on the Animations tab, if you don't see the wipe option already visible, you can click on this little button here to expand the list, and that's the one we want to choose right there, Wipe. And you might have noticed that it wipes from the bottom to the top. That's really not going to look very realistic that way, so we want to change the direction so that it goes from left to right like this. The other thing that's kind of nice here is that you can slow it down a little bit too, because this default speed that it gets at first, which is half a second, is a little bit fast. So you can play with the timing, but I think that increasing this to about 2 seconds seems to work pretty well. And then the last thing we want to do is just kind of size this up over a word, and then we'll send it to the back so that it's not covering up the text. So in the Format tab, we'll choose Send Backward and then Send to Back. And that way it's not going to cover anything up. Now the neat thing about this is that once you've drawn that shape, you can reuse it for any word because you can just resize it and reposition it as needed. So I'm going to do a Control-C here to copy it, and then a Control-V to paste, and then we'll apply it down here as well so you can see what that looks like. We'll size this up a little bit so it won't look exactly the same as the other mark, and then we'll send this to the back as well. So that's pretty much it. And now up on the Articulate menu, we'll preview just this slide, and we'll see how this would look if we were to publish this highlighting effect. Okay, so here's our slide, and then our first highlighting comes on about right now. There it is, and then the second one should be right down here. And that looks pretty good. Making a word look illuminated is kind of cool. To get this effect, you can draw an oval in PowerPoint and then make some formatting changes to make it look like the word is kind of glowing. So let's go ahead and do that. On the Insert tab, we're going to choose Shapes and then pick the Oval tool. And we'll draw an oval onto our slide. And it's okay to make it a little bit big at first. You can always resize and change the dimensions after you've formatted it. So the first thing we need to do is give it a fill. So on the Format tab, we're going to choose Shape Fill, and I like yellow, so we'll use yellow for this example. We want to get rid of the outline, so for Shape Outline, we'll choose No Outline. Now to get that kind of fuzziness around the edges, you can use this Shape Effects drop down right here and choose Soft Edges. And it seems like around 10 or 25 point works pretty well. You can always use the soft edges options, which brings up another dialog where you can set the value exactly, but I think that you'll probably find 25 or 10 works pretty well. I like 25 in this example. Then we'll also want to give this a little bit of a transparency so it's not quite as stark of a color. I'm going to click in this little corner button right here in the Shape Styles menu on the Format tab. That's going to bring up this Format Shape dialog, and it's already on the Fill option. That's what we want. We're going to come down here to the Transparency slider and just pull that transparency back a little bit. And you can see on my slide how my shape is changing as I adjust the value here. But if you pull that back just a little bit, it looks a little more organic and like it's really, like it's glowing. So 18% works pretty well for my blue background here. We'll go ahead and go with that. And now we want to size this and place it over the word that we want to emphasize. So I'm going to go ahead and just resize a little bit so that this looks like it's going to be making that word glow. And then the last thing is that we need to send this to the back so it's not covering up our text. So on the Format tab, we'll choose Send Backward and then Send to Back. Another thing you might want to try is applying an animation. Animations can make this effect look really nice. Usually a fade or a zoom works really well. So let's try that. On the Animations tab, I'm going to pull down our selections here and we'll choose Zoom for this example. And we won't mess around with the timing or anything. We'll just see how this looks. So we'll preview this slide and get a look at how this would look when it's published. There's our slide, and then our glow kind of comes on screen in a zoom fashion. So that looks pretty good. Okay, let's talk about using color to draw attention to a word. This one's kind of a trick because you actually use two complete text boxes, but you alter the appearance of just one of them. So here's my text box right here. I'm going to go ahead and select it and then do a Control D to duplicate it, or you could do a copy paste if that's what you usually do. So now I've got this second text box on top of my slide. I'm going to kind of move it out of the way so I can see it a little bit better. And now let's just say that the word that we want to draw attention to in our paragraph is the word specific. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that, and then up here on my Home tab I can change the color of that text to something else. Okay, so that's done. Next thing is we can apply an animation to this top text box. And the fade animation works really well. So on the Animations tab, we're going to choose Add Animation, and then we'll choose Fade. And then you can play around with the duration, maybe make that a little bit longer so it stretches out a bit. Okay, the last step is to get those two text boxes to line up exactly so that it looks like just one text box to the learner. And an easy way to do that is to select them both. So I'm going to select one and then hold down my Shift key and select the other one. Then up here on the Format tab, you're going to have some align options in this arrange portion of the menu. In my menu right now, I'm only seeing the icon, but you might actually see the word align next to this icon when you look at it. We're going to choose, it's kind of a two-step process here. We're going to first choose align center, and then we're going to click that button again and then choose align middle. And that lines up those two text boxes exactly. So they are stacked one on top of the other. And the one with the red word is on top. That's why we can see it right here. So now let's go ahead and preview this. So we'll preview just this slide and see what we ended up with. So there's our slide, and then the word specific kind of, comes into focus in a different color. So it's a pretty neat effect. Now you might wonder why we would duplicate the entire text box for this when we're really only drawing attention to that single word or phrase. And really for me, the answer is it's quicker to do it this way, to just duplicate the whole thing. It's very easy to line the two text boxes up because their size and their contents are identical. So you don't have to monkey around with alignment because you can just stack them exactly on top of each other by selecting them and using those alignment options on the PowerPoint menu. This is a pretty fun one because sometimes just seeing a human hand on a screen can really get the learner's attention, and it just makes things feel a little bit more human. So what I've got right here is an image of a hand pointing, and this one I just got out of a Microsoft clip art image. It's this image right here of the person looking at a map and pointing out a particular spot. And once I had the image on my screen on the Format tab, I just used Remove Background to get rid of the background with the map and the other stuff on it. And it looks okay. There's a little bit of a jaggedy spot on the left-hand side here, but if you size this down a little bit, it probably wouldn't be very noticeable in something like this. Another option that you can explore is purchasing, a package of images like the ones that you can find at elearningart.com. Those have the backgrounds already removed, so that's kind of convenient. Or you could always just take a picture of your own hand and use PowerPoint or another tool to get rid of the background. A lot of times that works really well also. Once you've got your image on your slide, it's really just a matter of adding an animation so that the hand comes in and looks like it's pointing at a particular word in your paragraph or on your screen. So let's just say that we wanted this hand here to point to the word this right down here in the lower left. What we could do is kind of size this and then move it into place. I guess that's maybe a little bit too big, isn't it? Kind of move it to where we want it to be. And this image doesn't have much of a wrist showing, so that's kind of weird if, we don't want that blue part to show through here. We want to make sure that we don't make it look like we're using a, disembodied hand, even though that's what we're really doing. So there we go. That looks pretty good. So now that our image is in place, we would just apply our animation. So on the Animations tab, we can use an animation called Fly In, which is right here. And when you apply that, you'll notice that it defaults to coming in straight from the bottom and coming straight up, and that doesn't look real nice or real, realistic. So we're going to change the direction here to come in from the corner. And the other thing I like to do is always check the duration. Half a second duration is very quick, and that doesn't really feel quite as natural as slowing it down a bit. So about a second and a half or a second and 3/4 seems to work pretty well. Then if you want the hand to come back off of the slide too, you can also give it an exit animation of fly out. So if you select it again and choose add animation, then you can use the fly out animation. And again, the direction is going to default to straight down, and we're going to change that so that it goes back to where it came from. And we'll adjust the duration again as well. So that's about all we need to do there. And now we can come up to the Articulate menu and preview this and see how this would look once we publish. So here's our published version, and it's going to come on screen about now. Point to the word and then slide back out. And of course you can play with the duration that it stays on the screen as well. But it's a neat way to, kind of dress up your slides and make it a little bit more interesting to look at and get your learner's attention. Hand-drawn elements are a super easy way to differentiate a word or a phrase. A simple little circle like the one that you see here on my slide, this can go a long way as a really effective call-out. And this one you can actually get for free along with a whole bunch of other really cool graphics that Tom shared a while back in the eLearning Heroes downloads section. To get there, you can just go to eLearning Heroes and then click on the Downloads tab right up here at the top. And you'll see a bunch of different folders that you can explore, and the one that you'll want to look for is called Graphics. And once you open that, you'll see all these different resources that I've got on my screen right now. And the one that I've used for this example comes from the download called 54 Miscellaneous Hand-Drawn Objects. Lots of useful stuff in there, so you'll definitely want to check out all of these resources. There's a lot that you can take advantage of, and again, it's all free. So once you've added your circle to your slide, like I've done here, it's really just a matter of putting it over the word that you want to emphasize, and you can stretch this and make it kind of fit with what your content looks like. Maybe rotate it a little bit if it's not quite the way you want it. That looks pretty good. And then once you've got it placed and positioned, you can just add your animation. So I usually use a fade for a circle like this. On the animations tab, we'll go ahead and choose fade, and we'll slow this down just a little bit to about 1 second. And now we can go ahead and preview this, and we'll see what this would look like. So there's our paragraph, and then our circle fades right in, draws the eye to that specific word. Sometimes when I'm using stock photos or clip art, I tend to want to modify the images or even combine them to make a whole new image. So we're going to take a look at how we can use PowerPoint as a tool to do this. We're going to use PowerPoint as an image editing tool to create an image to fit our needs. So here's an example. I'm on a slide here in PowerPoint, and you can see that I've pulled together a bunch of different clip art images from the Microsoft library. I just used the Insert tab and then chose clip art and found some images that I liked. And I've also got this circle here that I've inserted on my slide using PowerPoint's Shapes tool up here on the toolbar. And what I want to do is make all of these things into one image file, because I'm building an Engage interaction called a labeled graphic, which is actually something completely separate from PowerPoint. And I want to be able to bring in a customized picture that I've built to look the way I want. Now, of course, you can do this in other image editing tools too. I'm doing it in PowerPoint just because it's super easy and super accessible, and most people have it already. So it's kind of a neat way to leverage PowerPoint, not as a presentation tool, but as a way to create images that we can then use in other applications. So let's get to work here. I'm going to use this circle as the anchor for my image. I'm going to just size this up a little bit, make it a little bigger, and then I'm going to position these clip art items around the edge of my circle. These are going to represent steps in the recycling process when I build my Engage interaction. And I'm going to make this guy just a little bit bigger and then put that right in the middle. So that looks about how I want it to look. So basically anything that you can add to your PowerPoint slide like I've done here can then be saved out as its own image file, and then you can use it in whatever application you want. So here, now that I've gotten things the way I want them, I can select everything and then hit Control-G on my keyboard to group it as one item. And then I'm going to right click and then choose Save as Picture. And here I can choose from a number of different formats. You can see that there's quite a list here. I like to use the PNG format. That's a format that'll help to preserve the transparent background of my image, and it also works real well with the Articulate tools. So I'm going to call this recycle.png and save that to my desktop. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that any tool that you use like this to save out a picture in this way is going to compress things a little bit differently. And if you find with PowerPoint that when you save out your images, maybe you've tried a couple of the different formats and it's still not giving you super crisp output that you want, which can sometimes happen, especially with text. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of artifacting around the letters in your text. Then another trick that you can try is to just do a screen grab of the slide that you've built here and then save that screen grab as your image file. In fact, if you're using Vista or Windows 7, you've got a free snipping tool that comes with Windows. So you've got it already on your machine and you can use that to capture your screen. And if you're not using Vista or Windows 7, that's okay. There are plenty of other free or low-cost tools out there. I know Evernote is one that a lot of people like, so you can play around with what works best for you. In this example here, though, saving everything out as a PNG is going to work just fine. So what I want to do next is take that image that I just created and bring it into my Engage interaction. So I'm going to switch over to Engage. And this is my labeled graphic. This is what it looks like when you first start a labeled graphic in Engage. You've got this placeholder image right here, this flower, and I'm going to click on the Change Image button and then navigate to the image that we just created and then click Open. And here's that picture that I've built. I've brought it in as a single image. Now, all I would need to do is add a few more of these little red markers, right, in my Engage file and position them in just the right place on my image. And of course, add some text for each one. And then I can publish my interaction. I've actually already created a sample of this to show you. So I'm going to switch over to my published output and we'll take a look. So here's my Engage interaction and my image is right here, and I can click on any of these items, right, to learn about the recycling process. So it's pretty neat. The end result here was that I was able to quickly build my own image out of a bunch of separate images without spending money on a fancy image editing tool. And it was pretty easy to create just the look that I needed. So it's a real handy way to use PowerPoint to combine or customize the images that you want to bring into your e-learning courses. So I hope that gives you some new ideas for ways that you can use PowerPoint in your projects. One of the cool new things in PowerPoint 2010 is the ability to create very customized shapes, like some of the items that you see here, by using the drawing tools right in PowerPoint. All of these items on this slide were actually built in less than a minute or two using tools on the Insert Shapes menu, which is right here. And we also use some tools called Shape Subtract and Shape Union, which in my case I've added right up here to the Format tab on my PowerPoint ribbon. You can see that there's several tools right here. So for example, if I wanted to kind of recreate the same effect of this skeleton key with these shapes right here, what I would probably do first is combine these two items right here by welding them together using the Shape Union tool. So I'm going to select them both, and then right here we've got this item called Shape Union, and that turns that pair of objects into one object. And then I can take a chunk out of this part of the key by placing these circles right here on top of that rectangle. And watch what happens if I select it and then shift click to select the circle. I can come up here and click Shape Subtract, and it's going to take a chunk out of the rectangle. And same with down here. If I want to do the same thing, I would select the main object and then select the item, shift click to select the item I want to remove, and then choose Shape Subtract. So you can see how quickly you can make a pretty customized shape. The thing is, these tools are not going to be visible on your toolbar until you tell PowerPoint that you want them to be. So you do need to kind of hunt for them and activate them on your ribbon. And here's how you can do that. What you want to do is right click on your ribbon and then choose Customize the Ribbon. And then in the top section right here, we're going to choose Commands Not on the Ribbon, and then use the scroll bar to go all the way down till you find the shape tools. And the ones that I use most are Shape Union and Shape Subtract. You can also experiment with Shape Intersect and Shape Combine. Those are pretty cool too. So once you figure out which ones you want to use, you'll also have to figure out where you want to add them on your ribbon. I put mine on the Tool tabs in the Drawing Tools section, the Format part of the Drawing Tools. That just seemed to make the most sense to me. So here's where my new section appears. Wherever you want them to appear, you would select that section, and then down here at the bottom you can click this button that says New Group. That's going to add a new group to that section of your toolbar. And then once you choose the item that you want to add to that new group, you just click Add, and it's going to appear right there. So now, like, if I click OK and come back to my toolbar, you can see there's our new group, and it still says New Group just because we didn't rename it, but you can call it whatever you like. And now the tools that you add are going to show up right there on your ribbon. So pretty neat feature. We're looking forward to experimenting more with those, and you can check out other tutorials that show some ideas for how to use those tools. Sometimes when I'm building a course in Presenter with a lot of slide hyperlinks, one thing I like to do is test the links in PowerPoint slideshow mode, just to make sure that each hyperlink is pointed to the right slide. It's kind of a nice way to do a quick check. And you probably already know that you can display slideshow mode by hitting F5, or we can come up here to the slideshow tab and choose from beginning or from current slide. Or another way is we can click on this little icon down here in the lower right to display the slideshow from the current slide. But you've probably noticed that when you use any of those options, unless you've changed PowerPoint's default settings, the slideshow is going to take up your whole screen, right? Which sometimes is going to be kind of a problem, because unless you've got multiple monitors, it means that it's kind of hard to get to your PowerPoint file to make edits while your slideshow is running. And it just becomes kind of cumbersome to keep opening and closing the slideshow to go back and forth to your file. So here's kind of a cool tip. If you hold down your Control key and then click on this From Current Slide button, or this little icon down here in the lower right, that's going to display your slideshow in this much smaller format. And it's going to work just like slideshow mode usually would. So I can, test my hyperlinks here and just make sure that everything behaves the way I expect it to. But the cool thing is it leaves my PowerPoint file open and accessible. So I can, have both of these running at the same time. And that way, if I need to make any changes, like, if I want to maybe change the destination of the hyperlink that I've applied to this red text here, I can do that real easily. Or I can even change, the content of my slide. So like if I want to change this word right here, you can see that the change takes effect dynamically over here in my slideshow view. And then when I'm ready, I can just close out the slideshow by clicking or by hitting the escape key, and that's going to leave my PowerPoint file still open. So this might help your productivity a little bit to be able to view your slideshow and still keep your PowerPoint file very easily accessible for editing at the same time. I had a really good question where an Articulate Presenter user asked, is there a way to change PowerPoint's default animation settings that you see over here in the custom animation pane? So like, let's just say I wanted to have my animation effects default to the settings that I've applied to this particular image right here. I've got a fade in effect, it's set to start on click, and I've got the speed set to fast. And so what I would like is for every time I apply an animation, I'd like to use these settings so I don't have to go in and adjust every one of these items one at a time, right? Well, in PowerPoint, there's not really a way to change the defaults, but if you're working with images, here's one thing in PowerPoint 2007 that might help. What I can do is apply the settings to one image, like I've done here in this top image of the apple, and then whenever I want to add another image with those same animation settings, what I can do is copy the image. So I'm just going to hold down my control key and drag to create a new copy of that picture. And then I can just swap out the picture itself. And you can see over here that the animations are going to stay intact. So I've got the animations applied to that image, and then if I want to add a different image instead of this one, I right click, choose change picture, and then select the image that I want to use. And that new image drops right in, and the animation effects over here are still all set. You can also do a similar thing to shapes that you draw. So for example, with this rounded rectangle that I've got right here, I've applied a few animation effects over here in the custom animations pane. And if I want to use those same animation effects on a different shape that I want to draw, what I can do is control drag to create a new version of that shape. So there's the new shape with the animations, still applied. Those came right along with the new shape. And now what I can do to change this to a different shape if I want to is select the Format tab and then choose this Shapes drop down, select Change Shape, and then I can change that to whatever shape I want to. So like if I want to maybe add a straight-sided rectangle instead of a rounded one, I can do that and then resize it or move it however I need to, and the animations stay intact. So that's one approach in PowerPoint 2007. Now, if you're working in PowerPoint 2010, there is another way that's probably going to save you a little bit of time. It's a new feature called the Animation Painter, so I'd like to show you that too. What you can do is apply animations that you want to one object. It can be an image or a shape that you've drawn or a text box. It really doesn't matter what. And in this example, I've animated this third image right here of the apple. And then what you can do is copy the same animations that you've applied to that image. So everything I've applied over here, I can copy the same set of animations to anything else on my slide. And the way that we do that is select the image, come up to the Animations tab, and then choose this option called Animation Painter. And once I do that, you'll see that my cursor changes to this little paintbrush icon. And now I can click anything else on my slide, and that same set of animations is going to carry over to whatever I click. So you can see that I click this top image of the apple, and here are the animations that applied to the apple. Now, if I want to apply the same animation to several objects, what I can do is select the object I want to copy from, and then double click the Animation Painter. And now I can carry that same set of animations to as many objects as I want. So I can click on this image of the apple, I can click on a drawn shape like my rounded rectangle. I can even click on this text box that I've placed over top of my shape. Anything that I want, I can go ahead and continue to apply animations to those items. And then when I'm finished, I can turn off the Animation Painter by just clicking on the option again or hitting my escape key, and then my cursor goes back to normal. So those are a couple ways you can reapply your animation work in PowerPoint. In PowerPoint 2007, it involves swapping out the item that you copy, and in PowerPoint 2007 or PowerPoint 2010, you can use this cool new feature called the Animation Painter. So one of the improvements that I learned about today in PowerPoint 2010 is a pretty cool way to remove backgrounds from images. And here on this slide is a result of what I did with the tools that PowerPoint gives us. I had this image right here of this doctor, and it actually started out with quite a dark background, and I was able to knock that background out and place the picture into a different scene altogether. So you can see back here, this image of the hospital room is an entirely separate image, and these two images look pretty decent together. Now, if you've used PowerPoint 2007 before, which is what we've got right here, you might already know that there's an option in there to make parts of an image transparent, right? And a lot of times that works pretty well to take out the background of an image. So what I would usually try in PowerPoint 2007 is selecting the image and then coming up to the Format tab and then choosing Recolor. And right down here at the bottom is this option called Set Transparent Color. And in theory, once we've selected that, we can click in the background of the image and that'll cause the background to be invisible or transparent. But watch what happens when we do that in this image. You can see that PowerPoint doesn't really know what to do with the background of this image because the background is not really just one color. It's lots and lots of different colors or different, variations of this blue color. So it's not going to work very well to use that approach. So let's see what we can do with this in PowerPoint 2010. I'm going to switch to slide 1, which has our initial untouched version of that image. So what we want to do is select the image and then choose the Format tab. And we've got this new button here on the toolbar called Remove Background. So I'm going to select that. And what PowerPoint does is it makes a guess as to what parts of the image we want to keep and what parts we want to get rid of. You can see that it didn't do a great job at the first pass here. What we can do is help it out by changing these boundaries of the selection area. And as I do that, you can see that it kind of reinterprets the area that it thinks that we want to keep. And it's doing a pretty good job here. And that actually looks pretty good. I don't think that we even need to make really any adjustments there. It looks like it captured pretty much everything that we want in that image. So we'll go ahead and click Keep Changes. And there's our image without the background. And now what we can do is, move this onto whatever background we want to add it to. So there we are with the doctor in front of the hospital room. Now, not all images are going to be quite as straightforward as that. This is going to work best when you've got images where the background is, fairly high contrast compared to the part of the image that you want to keep. But there are some ways to fine-tune the selections too if it doesn't do a great job initially. Like, let's look at this example of this image of this little boy. What we can do is do the same thing we did earlier, choose the Format tab and then Remove Background. And then we're going to drag these boundaries to kind of frame up this selection a little bit better. And it's doing okay so far. And it looks like it got pretty much everything. I can see down here his shoes don't look quite right. Those are pink, which means that that part would be removed. We don't want that. So what we can do is come up to the toolbar and choose Mark Areas to Keep. And then we can, click on those areas that are pink right now that we want to actually preserve in our image. So that looks pretty good. I can see that back here though, there's part of the pavement is going to be retained as well. So we want to get rid of that. What we want to do now is come up to the toolbar and choose Mark Areas to Remove, and then we can click in those spots to get rid of the parts that we don't want to retain in the image. And sometimes it takes a little bit of extra clicking, but this looks pretty good, so we'll go ahead and see how that turned out. And that looks okay. I think that we could use that in a scene, drop it into a background or whatever. Now, this is still not going to give you the kind of precision that you would get in a dedicated image editing tool, but for a lot of images, like the one that we see here and like that image of the doctor, it actually works pretty well, and it does save you the time of having to launch a whole separate application and monkey around with lots of windows open and different files to manipulate. So with just a few clicks, it's definitely worth trying if you want a real quick and easy way to get rid of backgrounds from your images. So I shared this image with someone recently. It was created in PowerPoint, and they were saying, okay, this is pretty cool. I can see how you made this. Like, the monitor is a rounded rectangle shape, and the stand back here is a trapezoid shape. These are all things that you can get from PowerPoint's, Insert Shapes menu. But how did you create these jumper cables? How did you make this shape in PowerPoint? There's really no shape that lets you do that. Well, it's really a very simple idea. In PowerPoint 2010, you can draw a shape and then use other shapes to kind of sculpt that original shape by removing bits and pieces of it. So that way the outline or the perimeter ends up looking very different. You end up with exactly the shape that you want, and you don't have to draw it with the freehand drawing tool. So the tool that you use for this is, it's new in PowerPoint 2010. It's called Shape Subtract, And another related tool you'll want to know about is called Shape Union. And we've got another tutorial that shows you how to add those features to your ribbon if you're interested in doing that. In this tutorial, we'll see how those features can be used to create a custom shape like this one. So we're going to come up to the Insert tab and start by drawing a shape of a rounded rectangle. So we'll add that to our slide. And I'm just going to tilt it a little bit and then create a duplicate by holding down my Control and Shift key and dragging. And then in my Format tab, I can flip that by using this rotation option of Flip Horizontal, and that's just going to make a mirror image. And the first shape, I'm going to right-click on that and turn it black. I want to use Format Shape and then change the fill color right here. And then for the line color, I'm going to choose No Line. And I really only have to do that to the initial shape that I draw, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, next we're going to add a couple more shapes. We're going to use Insert Shapes and then add a triangle. And then we'll turn that around and fit that right in with the handle that we just created. And then the next shape, the final shape that we need to draw, is a trapezoid. That's going to be the clamp part of our jumper cables here, and we'll turn this around and then position it right on top of our triangle here. Narrow it down just a little bit like that. Okay, and the next step is we're going to weld these shapes together using that new feature called Shape Union. So I'm going to select the black one, and then I'm going to hold down my Shift key and select the other shapes that I drew. And up here on my Format tab, I've added that new feature called Shape Union. And when I click on that, what happens is that creates a single shape out of all those shapes that I selected. And it uses the attributes of the first one and applies that to all the rest. And that's why you're seeing that they all turned black. And now we can knock out the parts of the shape that we don't want. So for example, this circular area right here, we can just draw a circle, use Insert Shapes, and then draw a circle onto my slide. Actually, I'm going to draw two of them. Make the second one a little smaller. And I'm going to position that right here. This is the part where I want to, knock out the black from my shape. And what I want to do is select the main shape and then Shift click to select the part I want to remove. And on my Format tab, here's the other item that I've added to my toolbar, the Shape Subtract feature. I'll click on that and it takes that part of the image right out. And I can do a similar thing with this second one right here. Just position this kind of right in the middle there. And then I'm going to select the jumper cables and then Shift click to select the part I want to remove. And up here, I'm going to just click on Shape Subtract, and that removes that part. And I also drew, if we move over a little bit here, several squares. I'm going to use those to remove a part of this middle area here to make it look like the teeth of the clamps. I'm going to select all of the squares, and then up on my Format tab, I'm going to use the Shape Union tool to turn them into one shape. I'm going to stretch them out a little bit here and move them onto my clamp. And I think I need to move them to the front, don't I? So I'm going to use Bring to Front so we can see everything. And we'll just stretch this a little bit more so it covers the whole length of the clamp. And now again, we can just select the jumper cables, Shift click to select the part that we want to remove, and then up here on the toolbar we're going to choose Shape Subtract. So you can see how quickly you can create a very customized looking shape. The Union and Subtract tools are really pretty neat. Here are a couple other examples too of stuff that I created using a similar approach. This film strip, very easy to create using the same tools that we just looked at to knock out those little squares along the edge of the rectangle. This piece of paper has these holes that have been removed. Same with the tag down here. That's been, the little hole there has been removed, and the key here has been created entirely with PowerPoint shapes and used the Union tool to combine these. So if you're interested, you can check out our other screencast about how you can add these new PowerPoint 2010 tools to your toolbar. So we had a few questions about this effect where it looks like a hand is moving things onto the slide or moving images around. Let me go ahead and play this so you can have a look. It's actually a pretty easy effect to set up. Basically, all you need is an image of a hand and then whatever image or shape that you want the hand to move. And then you just add some motion path animations in PowerPoint. So let's see how to build this. This is what the PowerPoint file looks like for the published slide that we just saw, but we're going to start over here with a fresh one just so that it's a little bit easier to see each of the steps as we walk through them. Okay, my hand image right here comes from elearningart.com, and I believe it's still available as part of the free samples that you can get from that site. You could also, of course, take your own photograph and use that, but you do need an image with a transparent background so that you can, see the image that's behind the hand. In this case, this one's a PNG, which works great for something like this. So what you'll want to do is select both of the objects, and then we're going to move them a little bit. We're going to slide them right off of the canvas of the slide so that you can't see them, because this is where we want the motion path to begin. And then with both of the objects selected, I'm going to come over to my custom animation pane, choose Add Effect, Motion Paths, and then in this example I'm going to choose to send them to the right so that they move onto the slide. And then we need to do a little bit of tweaking here. One thing is they're currently set to a speed of medium, which to me seems way too slow, so I'm going to go ahead and change both of them to fast. And if you want, you can also change the start of the animation. Right now it's set to on click. I usually like to leave mine as on click because that's the type of animation that'll be recognized by Presenter when it's time to sync my animations with my audio narration. But if you wanted to, you could change this to with previous, or whatever, if you wanted it to start right when the slide starts. Okay, the other thing that we need to do is change the motion path length because we want it to move all the way onto the slide. You can see that it's pretty short right now. So with this motion path selected, I'm going to hold down my Shift key to keep it nice and straight, and then I'm going to stretch this to about the middle of my slide. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other motion path that applies to the hand. And this one I'm not going to move quite as far because they are staggered in their position. And then if I click this play button here to see how that looks, now that looks about right. So this is good. Now, if I also want the hand to move out of the picture instead of staying on the slide, I can add another motion path to that same image. So we can select the hand, choose Add Effect, Motion Paths, and then this time let's choose down. We'll choose a downward motion path. And once again, I would probably want to change this to fast to match the speed of the other one. And in this case, I'm going to change the start of the animation to after previous because I want the hand to move off of the slide as soon as it's done, pushing that map into the middle of the slide. Okay, so this is all good, but right now that second motion path you can see starts at the same place as the previous motion did, and that's not going to work because we really want it to start way over here at the end of the previous path, right, when the hand is done moving the map onto the slide. So what we need to do is select this motion path, and we're going to just drag it over here to the end of the previous one so that the green part of the arrow lines up with the red part of the previous arrow. And you can kind of eyeball this, but to make it easier to match things up, it really helps to have the snap option in PowerPoint turned on. And to do that, you can select any object and then choose the Format tab, and then you want to choose this Align drop down right here, and then choose Grid Settings. And I like to keep this one marked right here. It's Snap Objects to Grid. Some people also like this one, which is Snap Objects to Other Objects. So you can experiment and see which one works well for you. So now if I click play to see what this looks like, we can see that the hand moves the map onto the slide and then it moves out of view. So that looks about like we wanted it to. So these motion paths, by the way, publish just fine with Presenter, so it's kind of a neat way to add a little bit of visual interest to your e-learning course. So one of the helpful things in PowerPoint that can save us some time when we're creating an e-learning course is a tool called the Format Painter. And this is especially helpful if you're using lots of different effects on your objects or your images. Like on this slide right here, I've got these menu options on the right edge of the slide that I've created with PowerPoint shapes. And they all started out the same. They all looked like this, these blue rectangles that you see right here. But I was doing some experimenting with the top one, and I changed the look of it quite a bit with some effects. I changed the font, added a little bit of a glow effect around the edge. I added some shadowing to the text. So lots of little changes. And now if I decided that I liked this look and I wanted to make the rest of these menu options match that first one, I could obviously just, select these three rectangles here and then go through and make all those same individual changes like I did on the first one. But that takes a little bit of time, and sometimes if you've done a lot of tweaking and experimenting to get the right look on that first object, it can be kind of hard to remember all the specific changes that you've applied. So a quicker way is to just pick up all the formatting that I've applied to that first object and carry it over to the other ones. And the way that we do that is by using the Format Painter. So with that object selected, I'm going to come up here to the Home tab. Then I'm going to click on this little paintbrush icon right here. And I'm using PowerPoint 2007, by the way. If you're using PowerPoint 2003, the Format Painter is on the standard toolbar. You can see once I click on that, my cursor changes, right, to show that my Format Painter is active. I've got this little paintbrush that's following my arrow around. And now I can just click on any object where I want to apply that same formatting as the first one. And once I do that, all the formatting gets carried over immediately, and it just takes that one click. And if I've got several objects that I want to format, like I do on this slide, what I can do is select the object that has the formatting I want, and then instead of clicking just once on the Format Painter, I'm going to double click on it, and now I can click on as many objects as I want, and the Format Painter stays active until I come back here and click the paintbrush again, or until I hit my escape key. And this little trick works for images too. So let me switch to this slide. Here's another example. I've got this image here in front where I've applied this, kind of extreme, black and white effect using the format menu, and then I chose the recolor drop down and then this black and white option right here. And I've also applied kind of an extreme shadow here that I tweaked a little bit to make it offset and a little darker than what I would usually get with the default shadow effect. So again, lots of little formatting changes that would take time to reapply if I wanted to do the same thing to each of these people back here in the background. So what I can do is select the guy in front, come up to the Home tab and double click on my Format Painter. Then I just need to click on each of these images back here, and all that formatting immediately gets applied. So if you're working with a lot of the formatting effects in PowerPoint, this is just a real nice way to leverage some of those fun features but cut down on a lot of the work involved in applying them. So here's a good question that we received from an Articulate user. We've got all these cool downloads at eLearning Heroes, and the one that we're looking at right here is a whole bunch of hand-drawn graphics that Tom made. And a course designer was asking me if there's a way to easily change these to a different color right within PowerPoint. Like, let's just say, if we switch out to PowerPoint here, let's just say we're working with maybe these circles or check marks or arrows, and we want to change the arrow to a different color. And this one right here I've actually already changed to green, and I'll show you how you can do that. Up here on the Format tab, once you've selected an image, you can come over to this Colors drop down, and if you select that, you'll see a whole bunch of different options, and especially this last row right here is going to give you some very different color variations than just the standard shades of what you're already working with. So like if I wanted to maybe change this to blue, very easy to do that. Or if I wanted to change it to purple, I can just switch it right out to purple. And one of the things that sometimes people ask is, that's pretty cool, but what happens if the color that I need isn't actually shown here in this list? Then what do I do? Well, that's okay, because you can change what's available here. These colors all come from your design theme, because see, when I hover over these options, I'm getting this little tooltip. Like this one says, accent color 6 right here, and this one's accent color 5, and so on. Those are all names that are coming from my design theme, and that design theme is customizable. So let's see how we can customize that with the colors that we want. If you come up here to the Design tab, you'll find this option over here called Colors, and this is where you can control all of those theme colors. And you'll see probably a whole bunch of built-in theme colors, and this might be all that you see if you've never played around with the color themes in PowerPoint. These design themes cannot be changed because they're built in, but watch what you can do. If you come down to the bottom, you can choose Create New Theme Colors, and that's going to open up this window where you can pick any colors that you want. So let's go ahead and change that one that we saw earlier, this one called Accent 6, which is orange. We'll go ahead and just change that to something very different. Let's go ahead and choose pink, since that'll be really noticeable. And just so you know, you can change the color to one of the ones that are shown here, but if you need to change the color to something super specific, like if you've got some corporate colors that you want to specify the exact color value, you can do that too. You just choose More Colors down here at the bottom, and then you get this window where you can enter, the RGB values, or you can choose up here from the color palette. We won't worry about that right now. This pink one is going to work just fine. And then from here, once you've made the changes that you want to make, you can name your color theme if you want. It'll give it a default name, but you can name it something else if you want. And then you can go ahead and click Save. And then once you've done that, you can select your object again, come up to the Format tab, and then use the color drop down to apply the color that you just changed. So there's our pink color. It's no longer orange. You can see that it's it's that pink color that we were working with when we were editing the color theme. Now, if you change your mind, you can always come back up here to the Format tab, and there's this option called Reset Picture. If you click on that, that's going to trash any changes that you made. So, if you really mess up the colors and you want to go back to what it was when you first inserted the picture, you can always do that, and then that'll allow you to start over if you need to.